Thanks, Danny, for joining me on this project that I am embarking on. Um, do you want to kind of introduce yourself, and I'll continue to introduce you of how I know you as Danny. Like, what do you do? Where do you live? What's going on? What's been Danny for the last 20 years? 20 years. I took it
Uh,
back to Lebanon because I took it back to Lebanon, and that's where I know you from. So, and I'll fill in the
yeah, I
blanks.
mean, rugby league, and more rugby league for the last 20 years, really. Living in a medieval town called Uzès, which is in the Occitanie region of France. Moved here with my wife and son in October, just before the end of the Brexit transition period, which ended at the end of the year. Before that, was living outside of London for a year. Before that, living in London for 5 years in Canary Wharf. And before that, was living in Camden in London. And before that, was living in Mayfair in London. And before that, I was living in Lebanon for 8 years, from 2002 to 2010. So that's where we met.
Okay, so how'd you get to Lebanon? Oh, see, okay, so here's the thing. One of the stories you've told me once or twice, and I kind of used that as kind of inspiration or motivation or an okay or permission maybe at a younger age to pursue certain things that I enjoy is sort of how you got from whatever you used to do kind of into rugby and you did some journalism if I remember correctly. So can you just speak about that, how you sort of started in your career and how you transitioned and why you kind of did your
Yeah, I
motivation
mean,
for that?
my potted career in 30 seconds is a trainee hotel manager to diving instructor to city futures trader to city futures trader to diving instructor. Forgive me. The first one led me to the second one, for my own mental health, and then from diving instructing to journalism, and then from journalism to rugby league administration, and that's where I am today. So got to Lebanon in 2002, March the 10th, 2002. To cut a very long story short, big rugby league fan, was working in journalism in rugby league for websites, wanted to get involved in the sport more, wanted to contribute more, not just write about it, but influence it. And because my dad is Armenian, who was born in Lebanon, my mum's English, used to work for the United Nations in Lebanon. They met there, they married there. So I've got a link with Lebanon through my dad. And a Lebanese team was in the World Cup, the Rugby League World Cup in the year 2000. They were all Aussie, Lebanese heritage players and managers. No one had ever really spent that much time in Lebanon. Got to know them from a journalistic point of view, started covering them, and then had an epiphany, the first epiphany of my life, I guess, or the first one I remember, in 2001, and said, right, let's go to Lebanon, start rugby league in Lebanon, and followed it through, and it's been a tumultuous and amazing journey ever since, and the journey continues.
I mean, there's so many things I sort of want to unpack in that sort of 2 minutes or 3 minutes. One of the things, I guess, is how you got and what was the thought process between either allowing yourself or going from, because I remember you telling me you're pretty comfortable with money trading, trading, and you had a nice car, and then you just said right now for your own mental health, you sort of went from that to diving. So what was that kind of period like, and what was that thought process, and how did you get to that point? Was there a transition there, or did
Ah,
just the
well,
way? Yeah.
it's working in a city, especially working on the life floor, which is the London International Financial Futures Exchange. It was just not me. It's just not my personality, and it was
How'd you get
totally
there though?
different.
Like, how'd you start there? It seems such a big.
I started because I went to university, and I literally went to university for 2 days in England, and I was there for 2 days and thought, don't want to do this. Don't
For two
want to.
days.
Yeah, literally 2 days. I didn't want to be out of pocket for 3 years. I wanted to work, and so I went back to my home in London, and I applied to every single stockbroker and Citibank in the directory at the time, every single one. And I
What was
literally
the reasoning
got,
for that? Like, why'd you jump to that?
oh, my dad said, go and work in the
Okay.
city.
That's where you make all the money.
That's where you want the money, yeah. And I now know. I mean, back then I was what, I don't know, 20. I don't know, 20. I lose track of age, but 22, maybe 23. I can't remember. I had no idea about who I was, and so if your dad says, "Go to the city, make money," I haven't got any
Don't have money.
qualifications, so
There's money
I
in the
have
city.
money.
Go to the
Money's
city,
here.
make money.
Exactly right. It's logical. So I wrote to hundreds of banks, and I literally got one interview with the GNI, and I got the job there in the
Based
back office.
on no university, zero experience.
No university.
Just a numbers game. If I talk to 1,000 of them, one of them is going to let me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Had a good interview. Impressed the guy there. He loved sport. I was heavily involved in sport, and in fact, I got a mate of mine a job there by totally lying about. I told him, just say in your interview that you play squash for the county or something like that. And he
can relate to the guy over the sport.
Well, I said to my boss, "Oh, this geezer plays squash for the county," to totally lie to him. And this guy got the job because of that, and we pretended we didn't know each other for 3 months or something like that. Oh no, that's it. I didn't tell him I knew him, but anyway, so we had to pretend. It was a ridiculous plan that only 20-year-olds would concoct, but somehow it worked. But yeah, so from there I went to the life floor, and if you're in the exchange floor, and I was going out all the time. That was a big clubbing part of my life, and we'd have to be at work at 7 a.m. And I used to get so depressed on Sunday afternoon, like really depressed, because I knew that I had to wake up really early the next morning and go through the grind of commuting. And in fact, on Saturday and Sunday mornings, I'd set my alarm at 4:30, just for that split second realization that I don't have to go to work. I'd wake myself up and then, heaven, go back to sleep. So you can only do that for so long. And I had a great time there, but I was in the city in total for about 3 years, and I was in the life floor for 1 year, and that was enough to let me know that this is not my career, this is not my life. Plus, I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't very good at it as well. I wasn't very good at it. That's another important admission. Some people are naturals in the pit, and I wasn't. I never got to the pit. I was a trainee broker, and through all the pit trading training that we did.
What does it take? Was it like a personality thing? You weren't good at it?
No,
or maybe it's just your lifestyle at the time didn't let you sort of turn on.
No. It's very clear. My mind works very slowly. My brain works very slowly. I'm not stupid, but I need to reflect on things, and I need to take time. Some people, their brains work like that, and mine works. So if you're in a trading pit, and you've got people who are throwing numbers at you and hand signals at you, you need to do the calculations really quickly, and then work out which hands. And some people are naturals. I knew. I was 21 when I was doing it. I knew 16-year-old who was working down there, and he was absolutely incredible. He was absolutely incredible. And as soon as he would have got to 18, 19, he would have been in the pit, and he would have made a lot of money. But I was crap at it, and I didn't like it, and I didn't want to be there. So I was young enough to say, well, I'm not doing this anymore. I used to get to work and wake my friends up at 7 a.m. I used to phone them, I don't know, what an arsehole. Just to phone them, say, I'm at work now, what are you doing? And they'd all asleep. So that was terrible. And then I went to become a diving instructor. So I've been on holiday to Barbados to see my mate. And on the last day of the holiday, I took a tourism 30-minute dive, and I thought, I have got to quit work and be a diving instructor. Life is worth more than being in an underground hole without any windows and getting 20 minutes for breakfast and an hour for lunch and smoking 60 cigarettes a day. Life's more than that, and I have to get out. And one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
I mean, it's very. I mean, that's very obviously very interesting. You you went from diving to sort of then journalism. Just to have that minute of just it was so clear to you. I think today people are pushed and pulled by these feelings sort of because they're exposed to so many other options, like just from the internet and from media and from certain things. But at that time, I don't know what year we're talking about, but there was no sort of internet.
Mid nineties,
You weren't
mid
really
nineties.
exposed to it. So for me, it kind of blows my mind in a sense. In the mid 90s, I don't know, I was 10, 12, that you had or people had that amount of clarity without being exposed to it, to so many things and so many options, and the fact that you were kind of able to make that decision and just cut and go is kind of is that was that had that been your personality? Was that something you were sort of building, working on yourself to sort of improve, or was that just your reality of like, I can't do this, I'm not going to do this, diving is going to be it for however
Yeah,
long diving was it before you got into journalism? So like,
yeah. I mean, I did think that diving was it, because at that point I was thinking, right, I've chosen to do this. I've taken a long time to get myself qualified. I'm going to have to open a diving school, and
yeah, because it just doesn't happen overnight, right? But the realization was overnight, but to actually get there,
oh, the
it's like,
realization was overnight. Yeah, then it
yeah,
took a year. It took a year of training. I trained in Egypt mostly, so because I had quite a bit of money saved up, I was able to just go to this diving school that we knew one of the lead instructors, my friend and I stayed out there for several months doing my dive master. And then when I became an instructor, I lived in various places, and it was like between 93 and 96, I think, ending in Grand Cayman. And then in Grand Cayman, I was there for a year, and then decided that I can't be living my life as a diving instructor for the rest of my life. Need to do something. Need to go home again. But I never really, with
what was
any
it though?
sense
Like,
of
why not? Why did that change? How did that change?
just stopped enjoying it. Really, it was a bit. It was a bit. I mean, I'd done by that stage literally thousands of dives, so the lifestyle was fun,
Yeah.
but it was a young person's lifestyle, and I was still young, but I guess I had a frame of mind where I was never back then, and I don't know whether a 22, 23-year-old now would think the same, but there was never really a sense of pressure about not getting a job, because there were jobs available. Or so I thought at the time. Maybe it's exactly the same now, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I never really felt pressured about getting a job, because I'd got jobs before and I've got a strong work ethic. So I had just decided again. I guess I spoke to my dad, and my dad said, you've been out there a year now, so just come home now. And I agreed with him. And my friend who I went out to Grand Cayman, he had had quite a serious injury diving, so he left as well. So I thought, right, now's the time to
I guess
leave.
it fizzled out, and you enjoyed diving. Maybe you didn't enjoy teaching it and doing it 1,000
Oh, I
million
loved it. It
times.
was amazing. That is amazing. Yeah, I loved it. But
You enjoyed you
Grand
enjoyed like
Cayman is
taking
very
people out
American.
as well, or did you just was it you enjoyed diving and then maybe
Oh, I
you
love the
teaching?
teaching. Oh, I love the
Okay.
teaching. But Grand Cayman itself is a really I don't know how not to insult Grand Cayman, but it's a real package tour, like mass diving experience type of place. I had been raised in the Red Sea, where it was much more beautiful, more refined, like liverboard experience, desert experience in some of the accommodations, the domiciles, a more purist experience. Whereas Grand Cayman was like 30, 40 American divers on a boat, then everyone back to Holiday Inn, all getting pissed on 7 Mile Beach. And it was just a bit tawdry, I guess. And it was just a bit mundane and monotonous. So going home was the right thing to do. And that's how I got into journalism, then through a friend of mine who I met when I was in college in America playing football. But that was when I was 18, 19.
So that's like now, let's say you're about 22, let's around there. You're still in your early
Yeah,
20s.
23, 24.
Yeah. So when you say journalism, so that was just directly into sports journalism, rugby league, or how did
Yeah,
that?
it was
Was the pull
my
to it,
friend,
sorry, was the pull to it the rugby league aspect or the journalism aspect or both, or what was it?
rugby league. I my friend who he was in America in college on a tennis scholarship, and I was in America on a football scholarship, soccer. And we were the only two English people in this little college in Minnesota. So he became a lifelong friend of mine, still one of my best friends. And he got into, he's quite technologically minded, and he got involved in websites and mass media, the industry. And one of his friends was running a series of sports websites, and he told his friend that I was a big rugby league fan. So I met this guy, Chris, and he interviewed me, and I was upfront. I'm a Luddite. I have got very little technical acumen, but he said that's fine. We can train you on the spot. And so I joined a company, and after I'd never I'd only received, that was just when email was starting. That's
Oh,
how
so
it seems weird. No, well,
yeah,
I mean, not starting, but
picking up,
just
I
when,
guess.
yeah, just when it's become an everyday part of people's lives. And that's the first time I ever got an email, was to interact with people in that company about getting the job. And that was in 96, I think. And then, so I worked for them for a couple of years, worked for another company for a couple of years, and all rugby league websites as an editor. And then got made redundant, which is when I had my epiphany to go to Lebanon.
Cool. Um, I mean, that's pretty, pretty nice. One of the things I've sort of always uh, noticed about you, and I always appreciated and I always admired, um, is and it got me to thinking about this word, kind of conviction. So you present yourself in a very uh, convicted matter. I don't know if that's the right use of the word. You have certain beliefs and you go forward, and the way you speak about it is very um, strong, very influential. You have very I'm trying to get the word out. You have very no, I don't want to say stiff ideas in the sense that you're not able to change, but the way you speak about certain ideas is pretty inspiring just by looking at you and seeing how you believe it and you build a whole story around it. You're able to build that. Is that something that you've kind of worked on? First of all, do you acknowledge it? Is it something you've worked on, or is it something that has kind of been with you uh, in the like since I don't know, since forever?
I've certainly like to think I have the courage of my convictions, and I'm kind of an all or nothing person. Like I'll get ideas in my head, and I want to pursue those ideas and to the bitter end. I guess I'm stubborn, and I think it's been fascinating personal journey for me. Fairly recently, I did a master's degree, and part of that was about leadership and self-reflection. So I was able to reflect on my career and consider things in the context of theoretical frameworks. And it was a really interesting process to consider what I did in Lebanon, which now when I think back to it, it was quite mad. And and I'm loath to say this because I don't want to pat myself on the back, but kind of brave what I did, just to go out there on a limb and try and in an alien place and to get rugby league started. But I was so convinced that I wanted to work in rugby league, and that was a clear avenue for me to get involved, that it was something there was no doubt in my mind that I had to do it. And you'll know from, because you were one of the original year or the second year of the Lebanese project, that it was difficult to get going. It was great, it was enjoyable, but Lebanon's not a sporting country, so having that project and trying to get traction with it was difficult. So if I wasn't absolutely determined, then and a less determined person wouldn't have been able to do it. So I guess half of it is innate, and the other half of it is necessity.
Circumstantial, yeah.
Yeah, necessity. If I had to, I remember me and my brother were joking about this the other day. I had basically pinned my life on Lebanese rugby league working. Basically pinned my life on. I'd given up everything. I'd gone out there. It was a massive risk because there's no money in it, and I didn't do it to make money. I did it because I wanted to develop rugby league and then see where it went. And it got to a point where one of the teams I always used to play for the worst team, as you know, to try and give them a little bit of experience. So I've got the worst performance record in the history of sport, probably, because they always used to lose. And one of the teams was USG. And I remember playing with them, and it got to a point where the team, we were ready to pull out or something like that. And if we'd pulled out, it would have been a 3-team competition. And I felt we needed a 4-team competition. So my mindset was, if we lose this game, they're pulling out and my life's over. So that just turned me into a total arsehole on the pitch, arguing with the referee and going berserk. And it just so happened that the head of USG Sport had turned up to watch the game, and he looked at a madman on the field who was cursing and swearing and arguing, and he deduced from that experience that I was only doing the rugby league project for my own vanity and that I just wanted to win. And so he completely misinterpreted it, and I had to go into his office and I explained myself as I'm explaining myself now and apologise for my behaviour. But that was the intensity of my mindset, that it was, I just pinned everything on this, and it had to succeed. It had to succeed.
I mean, it's you really can't talk about you without talking. How long were you in Lebanon for?
8 years.
Yeah, without talking about that experience, but I'm so hesitant. It's so long and complex and such a big part of my life as well. I don't even want to attempt going there because we're not gonna sort of get anything complete out of it, just ideas. But I think it is quite insane that you were able to endure for that long. I mean, both of us knowing how difficult uh, how difficult that was. But going back to, I guess, your conviction, and that's sort of like you mentioned, part of it was innate, that belief that you needed to, and then you also, like you said, the circumstance you needed to, and that your life was pinned to it. But also the second part of that is, it does the conviction allow you, I have very strong ideas about certain things, but I'm less capable of communicating them than you are, right? So that's also one of the things I'm trying to do by doing this project. I want to get better at that. How is your ability to communicate, which I think is at a very high level, and I think many people will agree, tied to your conviction as being sort of innate and due to circumstance, and tied to just development over the years and things you've done?
I think development is a good word to use. I think I've always been the type of person who wants to try and approach things at an intellectual level. So dealing with some of the arguments that we had to deal with in Lebanon to convince people to do certain things was easy on an intellectual level because the arguments were sound and you could make people understand how it was in their interests. But that used to run headlong into the venality and corruption of the Lebanese system. So it was difficult for me to compute that. So I think as one gets more experienced and one gets older, I think the power of reflection and self-reflection is so important. And I have been able to use that to consider how I've communicated and to look at things from different perspectives, to learn skills like empathy, because it is a skill, and how it is so important in communicating. I mean, I used to be an arch interrupter, a big interrupter, and it was, yeah, and it's incredible when I speak to people now, because I learned a lot about empathy, and empathy is rated by leaders of the business world, as academics in the business world, as the most important skill, attribute, characteristic for somebody to have. So I was intrigued by this assertion, so I found out more about empathy and what it entails. And one of the big things that jumped off the page was about interrupting, and I thought, oh, that's me, I'm a massive interrupter. And now when I speak to people on the phone, it's hilarious, because you've got some of my colleagues who are just interrupting you left, right and centre, and I'm sitting there holier than thou going, unbelievable, interrupting me again. But they don't realise, and it's really frustrating. And my mentor, he was awesome at that, of just not interrupting, just listening to the point where you get embarrassed that you're talking so much about it. But yeah, so that's not the type of thing that I knew in my mid-20s. It's the type of thing that you learn through experience and through reading and through becoming more erudite.
So how do you not interrupt? Like, give me one or two or three, because I notice I do it all the time, and it was really hard for me to wait and let you finish and not jump in and say what I think about what you were just saying. But I agree, and I've thought about that a lot. But since, like, what are a couple of things you can say about practical tips on how to do it?
What's that phrase about I'm listening but I'm not hearing, or something like that? Anyway, but
know.
You have to force yourself not to do it, because until it's brought to your attention, you don't realise you're doing it. And I think it's fascinating. So now I have to. I mean, I've probably interrupted you in the course of this conversation, so people listening might think
hypocrite.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well said. But yeah, it is a skill, and you have to really. And I think it's really powerful when people know that you are genuinely listening to them and genuinely hearing what they're, because everyone would have been in so many circumstances when you're speaking to interlocutors who will be not looking in your eye or looking past you, shaking your hand while not looking at you, things like that. It's so disrespectful, and it instantly creates a perception of arrogance or disinterest or aloofness that will affect the rest of your conversation with them, if not further along. And I remember once when I was in journalism, and I got a guy down from the north of England, and he met my chief exec. And the chief exec was speaking to him while answering emails and looking at this, and I died of shame. The guy was so rude to this visitor. The least you can do is pay somebody the respect and dignify them with your attention. And I think building that bond with them through empathetic skills like listening is really valuable. And it's not just me saying that; it's something that, as I say, really successful, seasoned business doyens have espoused.
I think part of it is sort of skills you have to learn, and how to be around people, and not just sort of.
I'm not going to interrupt you for the rest of this conversation now. That's it.
Yeah. So I think some of it is skills, and some of it is like the looking away thing. I think maybe any other time I've looked away. I don't think I do. I don't think I have for years and years and years. I think I've paid attention to that, but it would come less from disrespect, more from maybe just lack of confidence for that interaction. So some of it can be learned, like the outer stuff. Okay, shaking firmly, looking at the person, and looking like right now I'm there listening to you, but the part where you kind of stop listening and interrupting becomes kind of, maybe in my, or at least in my own experience, either kind of you don't want to interrupt. You obviously want to listen, but you want so badly for that interaction to kind of go well, and then you get an idea, and then you want to say it, and at the same time you want to, I mean, you kind of want to look good, like you understand what's going on and you want to engage, but the end result is usually less effective than it would be if you just kind of listened, listened and waiting. So I think just other than just the hard skills of looking, shaking firmly, and just waiting, kind of the actual part of actually just really listening, not just waiting, right? Not just not
Mm.
interrupting, just like really listening.
Yeah,
That's another second level of the skill, I think.
yeah, and if I'm depending on who I'm speaking to in a business setting, at least it's difficult for me to speak while looking in somebody's eyes
Yeah.
in a
Or,
business
or
setting. I'm more comfortable.
keeping it for so
Yeah,
long, right? Like how do you do that?
holding a
You
gate.
feel like
I
it's disrespectful almost.
I'm more comfortable moving around and formulating sentences while not looking in somebody's eyes. But you've got to read the room as well. I remember in Lebanon once I went to meet a potential sponsor, and I was just talking and talking and talking at high velocity because I was so committed to what I was doing. And the guy that I was with was literally kicking me under the table, trying to get me to shut up because I was speaking so much. And I didn't read the room. So that's not a mistake that I would be making now, but you get
Where does it
experience.
come from though? Like where do you think it comes from?
What does
The need to sort of talk and not, because I don't think it's just like a etiquette sort of thing. I think it comes from a need to either uh, show that you know, or it depend. I guess depending on the personality, one aspect could be a lack of confidence, and or one could be you want to show a certain power or knowledge or
mm,
whatever, other than just knowing when to shut it and when to speak. Like when someone just speaks either too much or interrupts, or
mm.
where do you think it comes from?
Well, it depends on the circumstance and your frame of mind at the moment. I mean, that example that I gave was me being a really committed desperado who wanted to convince the person I was speaking to that you have to back what I'm doing. And Lebanon's a brilliant place to crush your ego when it comes to trying to get rugby league backing, because I've met with virtually every marketing agency, and I remember speaking to one guy and giving him the pitch, the same spiel that I would give everybody else, and he would be fairly disinterested. And his first thing that he said to me after I finished speaking was, "I support Arsenal, the football club." And I just think, what the fuck are you telling me that for? You know, I've been speaking to you for about 15 minutes about rugby league and sponsorship, and the first fucking thing that you come out of your mouth is, I support Arsenal." Like, why? And there was a series of interactions like that. But yeah, so I guess I mean, other times when people will be confident about what they're about to say, but it depends on your frame of mind and a whole series of things, I guess.
All right, I get it. With things we've talked about or that have come up, I don't think we've talked about very explicitly or for an extended period of time is religion. You've mentioned I don't know if you're comfortable talking about that.
Yeah, very comfortable.
Um, so I think the first time I learned the difference between an atheist and agnostic was was in a conversation with you, and you were asking me, yeah, what do you believe? And I was like, I was kind of in between the
That doesn't
fence.
sound like me. I would
Yeah,
never say
no, but
that.
you're like, no, but you asked me. You weren't explaining. You're like, are you atheist or agnostic? I'm like, what's the difference, kind of thing. And that's you just kind of like that. I don't know how we
Mm.
got into that conversation, but I associate that conversation and the difference between those two words with the conversation with you
Are
and
young
somebody.
20-year-olds allowed to be atheist and agnostic in Lebanon? They're not allowed, are they?
Well, I mean, do you even allow yourself? That's the thing. It's not about you being allowed. Like you're so, and that
You're
I think,
programmed.
yeah, kind of. So I went from I guess for myself, I went from, well, I had never been religious. I grew up, my family was fairly religious, not crazy religious. We went to church and things like that. But I maybe at the time we were in Lebanon in my 20s, I thought, okay, so I'm not religious. So what am I? I believe in a higher power, that bullshit, right? And so, but it's not, is it, is it sort of, is that like the Christianity God, or is that the Islam God? And then I sort of, as I went on, it went to, okay, I'm kind of more of a scientific uh, thinker with respect to that. So I don't really think there needs to be like this umbrella God power type thing for. And then as I sort of got older and I think about this stuff, I started to realize the utility of, of religion, right? And it's actually, I think it's important for people, not necessarily, I mean, it's such a touchy word when you associate it to places like Lebanon and other places where uh, I want to think of religion outside of politics and how it is. But I started to think about its utility of like a set of values, and when you start to sort of get older and like sort of guidance. And so it went from this is not cool, it's not me, to kind of a bit more scientific, to kind of a bit more sorry, something happened here. Kind of a bit more utility based, and I see that there is a utility for it, right? So I'm wondering what you think about that, and if your positions on that have changed, because in my mind you're notorious for being an atheist for in our relationship, right, and how we talk about things. So my
Yeah,
ideas have changed. How have yours sort of evolved?
not a, well, I was going to say not a particularly religious family, although my mum's family were pretty religious, like churchgoers, involved in the church. My dad's family being Armenian, they were pretty religious, Orthodox Christians. But I grew up in North London, which is a fairly irreligious place. And there's a Dutch politician, I forget her name now, but she's an apostate Muslim, and she describes herself as a Enlightenment fundamentalist. So I like to
What
follow
does that
that
mean?
kind of. She believes in the Enlightenment, the age of reason, and that science and rational explanations are probably more robust and stable than. I like to use two Voltaire quotes. He said, "God is a comedian that's playing to an audience that is too afraid to laugh," which I think is very apt. And he also said, "Those who can make you believe in absurdities can make you commit atrocities," which unfortunately in religions past has borne out. So you mentioned about values, and I think there is. I think the vast majority of people who follow religion will draw positive lessons from that religion, how they live their life, how they teach their children, how they interact with one another, and all power to them. Good luck to them. I see life through that prism as well, but not through a religious prism, but just wanting to do good to other people and respecting other people and letting them live how they want to live.
You don't feel, or you haven't observed people as sort of they get older, that position changes. I mean, again, not back to a certain religion, but I feel I've observed also, and in my own sort of thinking, that you start to want to attach more meaning and a certain roadmap. All right, where is it going? Does it matter? Does it not matter? And it's not saying that takes you back to religion, but that sort of highlights the utility of religion for some people, right? Because that's taken care of for them in a sense. But you don't think that you start to search for that kind of utility, even if it's outside religion, or that kind of I don't know if my idea is developing correctly and making sense. I'm not sure if you understand.
I haven't reached that point yet, and frankly speaking, in my immediate circle, nobody I know is religious. Nobody believes in God. I think if you go to areas of London where I'm from, the number of parishioners in church is just reducing so much. So I certainly don't think that I will ever start believing in God. But I certainly haven't considered it at any great length.
Um, well, I've noticed. I mean, not just God, but I feel I've been noticing, or I've been seeing people start to, let's say, in your teens, 20s, 30s. If you don't think about that stuff, you don't think about that stuff. If you've dissociated from it, you've dissociated from sort of the idea of religion. You just don't believe in it. But by the time maybe you get to your uh, late 30s or 40s or 50s, and I guess depending on everyone else, maybe they don't seek it through religion. But haven't you seen that they've maybe tried to seek that meaning, maybe in doubling down in their ideas about science and rationality and reason and that kind of stuff? So have you seen that? So whatever your ideas are, let's say, what'd you call it? Enlightened.
Enlightenment fundamentalism.
Do you think you double down on it more now as you get older, as kind of a thought? Like, do these things sort of become more aware as you grow older, or it's just been a sort of steady state of atheist, and then this kind of idea
Yeah,
represents what I sort of view things as, and I'll just attach that name to it, and it's just been consistent and
yeah.
constant for the whole time.
I guess that you become more aware as you get older, so you become more self-aware, and so you start. And I read a lot, so once you read a lot, and then you get interested in certain topics, you want confirmation bias, which is a natural state of being. So you tend to read more about that subject that confirms your state of mind anyway, which reinforces your position. I must admit that when it comes to religion, the way in which religion and multiple religions have been publicized in the news, and no news is good news, deters me from having a more affectionate view of them, while understanding completely that religion for 99% of people will be a positive life force and a positive institution in their world. But the the Christian right in America, atrocities that are committed in the name of gods around the world are publicised heavily in the news, and maybe that has a subconscious effect on people like me, that you hear enough about it, you hear enough of the drip feed about it for it to confirm the decisions or the life path that you've chosen, or the beliefs that you've got.
Fair enough. Um, I know you read, and you just said you read a lot. Uh, Sort of what kinds of things do you find yourself going back to reading? Has that changed, and how do you approach generally self-development? I spoke with my friend last week on this sort of podcast. He was the first person we recorded with, and he had been in the same line of work with the same company, management consulting, for 15 years. So he started from an analyst to he's a partner now. Uh, and I asked him how he approached self-development, and I got the sense, and when we spoke about it, is that when you're in a, I don't want to give it a negative connotation, but sort of a rigid path, also a corporate path, one very like that kind of thing is almost taken care of
Mm.
for you in terms of self-development training, and you do all the things that you need to do to advance, and then they also push these certain things on you in your training and development, right? And whereas I've had a very different path in terms of not one career, from engineering to food and beverage to technology to whatever it is, the things I do, and I take a much more active role in my own self-development. So I'm wondering what you think about self-development, and how that has it played like an active role in your life in terms of, I need to keep developing myself, or is this just something that you do kind of passively, or how do you think about your own self-development?
I'd never given it a moment's thought until I left Lebanon and started working for the European Federation, because then I had a mentor. Without being labelled a mentor, he became a mentor, and made me realise that I'd learned on the job. You know, everything I'd done, I just learned on the job, and taken subconscious lessons, or used my own personal value system to guide me. Going back to having courage of one's convictions. And then once I got a mentor, I was able to, and in the job that I was in then, part of it was ensuring that I grew into the job, because I was still very raw as a professional administrator, and there was certain things that I needed to get better at, or learn more about. And so I threw myself into, like, good governance, for example. I threw myself into learning about good governance, and that leads you down a particular path. And then I mentioned before that I was given this opportunity to do a master's degree, and that talks a lot about development. And I mentioned some of the modules, leadership and leading sports organisations, and all of the associated reading and lessons that you get from that makes you understand how personal development is really important. But for the majority of my life, I basically learned on the job. I just taught myself, and so if people do have the opportunity to develop through expertise or patronage of other people, then I would take it with both hands, because it is so important. Just learning about yourself. It's kind of, I'm not comfortable, which may seem odd since I'm doing this, but talking about myself. But when you get that opportunity to have other people consider your worth and how you may improve, and when you get things back in writing from them that summarize your character and your attributes and your value to a potential employer, for example, it's really interesting. It's really interesting how some of them get it right and some of them get it wrong, but it's very interesting.
Apart from so that's all mostly professional, right? And I agree. What about sort of the personal aspect, right? I mean, I feel that they go hand in hand, right? A lot of things that you develop with professionally in terms of hard and soft skills, those translate to personal. But have you thought about it on just like a sort of personal level? Do you need a certain development just for the job, or a certain amount of development for you to get better, sort of as a
bring my wife in here?
Yeah, she'll highlight all the things that you need to work on.
Exactly. Well, I think on a serious note, when you are married with a family, you have to develop, because you're not just about you anymore. You're in a partnership, and if you remain rigid and without the ability to see other points of view or to compromise, then it's not going to go well. Ultimately, this partnership that you're in. So, you have to develop, and I spent most of my 20s, most of my 30s, just having a good time, really. So when I got married late 30s, then I was at a point in my life where I was mature enough, I guess, to be able to do that. And I always used to think, how do people get married early? That's just madness.
How come?
Why would they? Well, because they're not able to find themselves, and I felt as though they were constrained. When I was working in the city, one of my first ever jobs, I was about 20 or something like that. My friend phoned me up and he said, "Guess what I'm going to be? Three letters." And now it's obvious, Dad. But I without joking, I was like, CAT. What are you going to become? Like DIK? What? I have no idea what he was talking about. And he had to say he was becoming Dad. I could not believe it. could not believe it. It was just so far from my my personality or where my life was taking me. So yeah, I think marriage is probably a good line in the sand to trigger personal development.
So before that, you never really, I feel like you were just idea, this is what I want to do, and whatever it's teaching me, I'll do, and however it's pushing me, I'll grow and I'll learn. But you never thought as a side thing, apart from what it was exactly that you were doing, that I need to keep learning and growing. It's just whatever you're
But
presented with.
I've got a very strong internal belief system, a very strong internal value system, which is built around a sense of justice, which I think I inherited from my dad, and respect. And so I'm not some kind of social justice warrior by any means, but that's my guiding North Star, my principles. And I guess I've been fortunate enough to be able to allow that central belief system to guide me. How those beliefs have developed, I'm not sure. I guess one of the things we talked about was being less rigid in some of your perspectives, like, and as you get older and more mature, you realise that yes, it's all right having a strong central set of core beliefs, but if you're going to stick to them and adhere to them, come what may, without seeing other perspectives, then they can be as much of a pejorative as they are a positive. So I guess that is personal development, but my own personality would probably lead me to suffer by sticking to my own core beliefs than relenting from those core beliefs and giving up on them, in a nutshell.
Okay. So it's basically, I guess, like you said, the confidence of your principles that has led you in that direction. You haven't felt the need to move away from those to learn other things or to get other principles or to get other values. You feel like the core that you've had have led you in a good way. Obviously, you have improved in other complementary ways, but you've had a good base in terms of
well, whether it's good or not, I'll leave others to decide. But
strong enough base.
I've got a very, I know myself, and I know I've got everyone, I guess, to a certain extent, knows themselves because they know how their body and their mind reacts to certain situations. And I know I've got a very strong core belief system.
How do you know yourself, or how do you know that you know yourself?
Because if something I see is not just, for example, hackles will be raised and I will become uncomfortable, and I'll want to see natural justice prevail. Like seeing the Trumps walk around free, for example, is disgusting to me. What is happening in politics in America is incredible and disgusts me in equal measure, because I guess we're in a post-war, meaning Second World War era, and so our view of the world is based on this Western liberal democratic ideal and a stable system of peace. The EU has been responsible for the longest period of peace and prosperity in European history, probably, and we've all experienced that. So for us, it's a norm. But now you're starting to see the edges around that fraying, and is that because history starts to repeat itself, and as the people who lived through the war and who lived through the horrors of the war are dying, the new generation becomes cyclically politically motivated into different ideologies, and humans have got a great track record of making the same mistakes and making a lot of mistakes.
Well, how do you think technology plays into that sort of how these things are perceived or amplified, and those roads are taken?
Well, I was definitely born in the wrong era, so talking about technology is difficult for me because I belong in the 18th century, and I was when I was at school, we just got a computer block, and there was like 2 computers in the whole school. And I'm at a stage now where my niece is like programming computers. She's 7, doing computer programming classes. And clearly, technology is obviously just got such a massive impact, and I'm scared about where it takes the world. I've heard people talk like TED Talks, in TED Talks, these visionaries who are discussing what the world will look like in several years, and no one will have jobs. It'll all be automated, and so the human race will have to
but also
redefine itself.
No one will need jobs in that sense. I have ideas about that, and I had started reading a book authored by one of these guys that has. I think the book is very well known. He has one that's called *Sapiens*, Yuval, which is like the history of the world, I guess, in a book. And then he has, I'm not sure what it's called. It's actually right over there. Homo Deus. I'm not sure how to. So he speaks about Homo Deus. He speaks about the future, and I had just started reading it, but I put it down because I was working on something. But yeah, it becomes.
I only read about the past.
Yeah, you read a lot about history. Has there been one book? I remember that as well. Has there sort of been one like mind-shifting book? I mean, obviously, in every book that you'll read, you'll get lots of golden nuggets and things that sort of shift and expand your perspective on certain things. But is there one book you can kind of go back to say, this was the book for me that kind of just at the time, whatever that was.
Not a book, but I took an oath to myself many years ago now. I can't remember when, but from now on, I'm only ever going to read about the French Revolution and the Napoleonic period, and I'll allow myself to read books that are given to me as presents that don't fit that.
Why though? Why?
But I only read books about the French Revolution and the Napoleonic period now.
Why?
The French Revolution fascinates me as such an epoch-changing era where absolutism was tipped on its head, and man was given the opportunity to live out Rousseauian a social contract, and to determine its own political future.
Yeah.
The French Revolution abolished slavery, 60, 70 years before the British did. Yes, it was reintroduced after the French Revolution ended, but it was still abolished. So the rights of man, and although it followed the American Revolution, it was still a more pure sense of self-determination in my view, and it goes back to my innate sense of justice. That although there were many injustices and atrocities in the French Revolution, to get to that point where you had full suffrage of the population in a modern industrialized, militarized state, that it was, it's just an incredible era with a fascinating history and a fascinating cast of characters as well. So yeah, I read repeatedly on that subject.
You don't move. You're continuously reading on it, or it's just simply nothing interests you in terms of reading, or at least sort of.
Loads interests me, but I've made an oath. And
why would you make an oath though? Like, why would you be that extreme about it?
Because
what would lead you to?
I'm all or nothing, and I said I'm only gonna read about this. Like, to be an expert. An expert knows more and more about less and less, and I'm not an academic or a scholar, so I'm just gonna. I enjoy reading about that, and I keep reading about it. And I've got books on my bookshelves that I've bought. I've got a book that was printed in 1799, hand cut paper from the Revolutionary period itself. Right. I've never read it, but I collected it. Fascinating, and I shall continue to do so. You can never read too much about one subject, I don't think.
That's interesting. I mean, that kind of focus is pretty intense. I'd almost like to talk about that, but I don't know where to begin. Is that something you bring to other parts of your life, that kind of focus for so long in terms of, I mean, you've been in rugby league for how long now? As
Since,
a,
if you include journalism, since 1997 or 8.
yeah, sure. Okay. So how does how does rugby league and what you've done tie into sort of I guess as we wrap this up, maybe we can bring in all the ideas together. How does rugby league tie into that type of focus, your convictions, your need, I guess, for justice? Is there a greater purpose
Well, it's quite
behind
neat and
it, or is
tidy.
it just a job? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's just a
No,
job
no,
to you, right? There's
it's quite a neat and tidy link there. If you think about it, because without going into it in minute detail, rugby league was a sport that was born out of injustice. You know, the northern working class males who are deprived the opportunity of compensation for missing a day's work on Saturday by richer, more entitled southern rugby people, and that movement became rugby league. That sense of justice, and now you can see it. You've seen it yourself. I'm not sure whether you came on tour with us into to Morocco, but
no, that
getting
was the only
thrown
one I missed. There's so
getting
many good
thrown off
pictures. I
fields
feel
for
like I missed everything when I missed that one.
getting thrown off fields because you play rugby league, not rugby union,
Really?
and that that sense of injustice and the need to be able to express your human right to play sport runs very deep and strong, and rugby league is still attempting to fully embrace its right as a sport, and so many people around the world who are picking up the sport now, and it's growing every week. So many more countries playing it, so many new participants playing it, but in many places there is still this struggle for many reasons. There's not like some massive world conspiracy against rugby league, but for many reasons, but they are faced with the difficulty of having a recognised sport as rugby league, which is governed by rugby league people under rugby league rules, and all they want to do as citizens is participate in their sport, not somebody else's sport. So there's a very clear link between my own innate sense of justice and why I'm so passionate about rugby league's progress.
Um, you've never felt the need in any way to sort of take that on to other avenues, um, or is it just you're comfortable there pursuing that?
Well, I love what I do. I'm privileged with what I do, and it's a great job to have, a great series of jobs that I've had, to be able to contribute to something that you love and to be able to see the results of your labour. And I'm still contributing or hope to contribute. And when the day that rugby league says you're not going to contribute anymore, then I take that on the chin.
All right, Danny, thank you so much. I mean, with you very specifically, I could talk about a million things. I hold you in very high regard, and I can say, I don't know if I said it too, but I've learned a lot from just sort of kind of watching you and us working on rugby league together and just certain conversations. So if you give me 8 hours, I'll try and come up with things for 8 hours, and I'll probably get more comfortable doing it as we go. So thanks a lot for giving me this time.
No, thank you. Very kind of you to say so.
Yep, and I mean, I hope when I sort of get better at this, you'll give me another jab at it
Yeah, of course.
to have another sit down for an hour or
Yeah.
so. All
Yeah,
right,
whenever.
all right, Danny. So I'm gonna.
Cheers, Jed.
All right, thanks so much.